It's a very good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to our press briefing, which is going to focus on the upcoming ZEC process, which will enable citizens to inspect the national voters' roll. I apologize most sincerely for the late start, but without further ado, I'll defer proceedings to our Elections Directorate, which today is represented by Ms. Ellen Shiriedenga, who's going to address us on where we are in as far as the election watch is concerned, as well as what citizens are to expect as we approach the voters' roll inspection process.
Okay, thank you, Champion Fadzi. Good afternoon, everyone. Basically, this presser is to just provide an update as to the electoral issues at play, and also in particular, the aspect of voters' roll inspection. But as you are all aware, and I'm sure some of you have been reading through some publications, if we are to go by the timelines as projected in our Constitution, our election should be between the 20th of August and the 26th of August 2023. Those timelines came about after, the due date for the expiry of this current government, which is supposed to expire on the 26th of August, and also if we are to use the current current delimitation report, which was gazetted on the 20th of February, what it means is that the 6-month time lapse is on the 20th of August 2023. So the projected dates for the elections are between the 20th and the 20th of August and the 26th of August. Be that as it may, last week ZEC announced the voters' roll inspection, which is supposed to commence tomorrow, the 27th of May, up to the 31st of May. That in itself is a clarion call to say that elections are here, and we are anticipating that the election proclamation should happen sometime in the coming month of June. In that regard, we'll want to discuss issues relating to elections. First and foremost, we're looking at the biometric voter registration process. Section 26A of our Electoral Act speaks to the issue that our voters' roll is supposed to close 2 days after proclamation. So what it means is that the BVR, the voter registration process, is anyone who wants to register as a voter should register before 2 days before the proclamation is done. So as the CCC, we are calling upon all Zimbabweans who are eligible to vote, to register to vote, who are 18 years and above. We have not yet registered, to say, let's utilize this short window. Let's get registered before the second day after the proclamation, because if one does not utilize that opportunity, what it means is that he or she won't be able to vote on election day in August. And that in itself, clearly it means that one will be sitting away his or her responsibility, to make political and democratic decisions. And ultimately, what it means is that someone out there would make the decision for him or her, and there will be a risk then that wrong leaders will be elected into office if you don't take up the call and take it as if it's your responsibility to register to vote and to vote at the end of the day. The ZEC district offices are open. Voter registration is a continuous process, so let's utilize that opportunity. Let's go to the nearest district registration centers and register to vote. In March 2023, earlier this year, there was a voter registration blitz. And of course, as the CCC, we took up this opportunity and we mobilized citizens together with other stakeholders out there. And the voters' roll then, we're told it was about 5.8 million people were on the voters' roll. The sad part about it all is that to date, we still do not know as to how many people were registered during that process. Of course, we hear we see messages here and there circulating in terms of the figures, but there is no official communication from ZEC in terms of the numbers of people that registered during the voter registration in blitz, during the voter registration blitz in March. So the challenge with regards to that is, this short window I spoke about earlier should be utilized in terms of ascertaining areas where there were under registrations of voters, where eligible citizens were not able to participate in the voter registration blitz for one reason or another. But because there is a void in terms of that information, at the end of the day, we are not able to tell, for example, in Mat North or in Mat South or in Murewa, if there were people that failed to register but still are willing to register as voters. So that is a cause for concern to say, let there be no obscurity in terms of election data. The voters' roll, for example, is a public document. Hence, such information should be at the disposal of all citizens of Zimbabwe. The second issue is the voters' roll inspection. Like I said, the dates are between the 27th of May to the 31st of May, and it's a good opportunity for citizens to physically visit the voter registration centers as announced by ZEC, and also utilize the online platforms that have been provided for by ZEC. What we are saying is the CCC, and that is a message to all Zimbabwean citizens out there who are eligible, we have registered as voters, to say this is a big, big opportunity for you. You need to check if your name is correctly captured on the voters' roll. If, say, for example, your name has been misspelled, or possibly maybe your identity number has not been captured correctly, there is a high risk that you will not be able to vote on election day. So rather, instead of you exposing yourself to that risk, just take up the opportunity, visit the registration center at ZEC, at the ZEC inspection offices, and also at the same time utilize the online platforms. And secondly, the reason why we implore upon citizens to take up this opportunity is because we just come from a delimitation. There are lots of changes with regards to constituency boundaries, ward boundaries, and even some polling stations have been changed. You might be used to your own traditional polling station only to wake up today and be told, no, your name is not in that polling station. So really, this is an opportunity for people to go out there and check and inspect the roll to see whether their names are still in at their respective polling stations where they used to vote at. And be that as it may, we are receiving reports from the citizens out there, which we will be referring to ZEC for redress. For example, we have people in Ward 18 here in Harare, which before delimitation was Harare North. But now when they try to check in the BVR online system, they are still reflected as being under Harare North. Yet currently, with this current delimitation, they are supposed to be in Harare East. So we've received numerous queries in that regard to say that there have not been, changes in terms of the new delimitation boundaries. So that is one issue that we are relaying to ZEC to actually address. And also we've had instances, for example, in Bulawayo, there's some wards that moved from Ward 4 to Ward 5, which is now under Bulawayo South. We've noted that about 4 of the affected polling stations, they are not there in the listed voter inspection centers. So this is the kind of clarity that we kind of request from ZEC to say, what has happened to those people that were in those respective polling stations? Because they might risk at the end of the day that they might not be, they could have been left out, and come election day, and those people, if at all they do not check their names at the moment, they might risk having their names not being there on the voters' roll. So this is why we are encouraging people to check their names, and also encouraging ZEC to address those anomalies that have been identified. Tied to the voters' roll inspection, we have noted also, the shenanigans from our colleagues in ZANU-PF. Just last week, there was a memo circulating indicating that there's going to be a voter inspection period, and directing their people and an organization called FAIRS, Forever Associates of Zimbabwe, and also Heritage Trust, to do the profiling of voters. And clearly that is illegal. That is a clear infringement of the political rights of our citizens. No one needs to be profiled by anyone, and no one needs to be marshaled to any, polling station or whatever inspection center by anyone. Just as well, we are receiving reports from Mondoro, for example, Ward 5, Ward 19, Ward 15, and Ward 9. Mufuka village, where traditional leaders, the headmen, have directed that all persons, they'll go to the voters' roll inspection centers under their guidance. The Sobuku will go in front, and then the villagers will follow behind that person. So really, clearly, those are the infringement issues that we're talking about. The political rights of Zimbabweans are being affected in that regard. And these are the issues that you want to point out to say the role of traditional leaders, let it not be abused. We all know that the traditional leaders are supposed to be non-partisan, and they are not supposed to be marshalling people. And remember also during the by-elections last year, we complained about the aspect of command voting, where FAIRS also, and including some traditional leaders, we're actually forcing people to declare illiteracy so that they'll be assisted voters. So these are the issues that we've been highlighting to say, we're approaching an election. Let people exercise their free will to choose the leaders of choice. The third issue is the voters' roll accessibility, credibility, and verifiability. Yes, we've told that the voters' roll is ready for inspection. Clearly, what it means is that the voters' roll is available. So we, as the stakeholders, we continue imploring ZEC to make the voters' roll available. The voters' roll is a public document in accordance to our constitution, and the voters' roll should be given to any person who pays the required money according to our laws, right? And also, be that as it may, one has an option to say, I want a soft copy of the voters' roll or a printed copy of the voters' roll. So this is where we are, to say there is still no access to the voters' roll. We are headed for an election, and clearly a voters' roll is like a syllabus. If you go to an exam, having had the syllabus, obviously you'll find you get a lot of surprises on exam day. So really, this is why we're saying we need the voters' roll. Let that voters' roll be given to the public, and remember, the voters' roll should be verifiable, should be analyzable. We want to analyze that voters' roll. It is our right as Zimbabweans to make sure that we analyze, we audit the voters' roll. This is why even in our electoral reforms blueprint, we spoke strongly about, the voters' roll being subjected to an independent audit. That in itself brings credibility to the electoral process. Look at what happened in Kenya in their last election. They had an independent auditor auditing their voters' roll, KPMG. And whatever came out from that audit, the election management body made corrective measures. This is what we are asking from ZEC. So let that voters' roll be audited. Let citizens have access to the voters' roll so that we know exactly what is it that we are dealing with. And most importantly, we want to know, for example, at a ward or at a constituency, how many eligible people are there. That is basic data, that is basic information which should be available for everyone. And we are political parties. We want to plan. And how do we plan if we do not have that kind of statistic? So this is where we are concerned, where we raise our concern also with regards to the voters' roll. And the fourth issue is the amendments to the Electoral Act. I think in that regard, let me take this opportunity to actually applaud our members of parliament. They've been working tirelessly in parliament the past 2 weeks in terms of debating the Electoral Amendment Act, which is before parliament. Let me hasten to say also as a party, we presented our own submissions to the Electoral Amendment Bill, and we are hoping that they will be considered. But of course, let me hasten to say, as a country, we have had a problem, and clearly there hasn't been any political will from the state to actually implement the electoral reforms. The Constitution was adopted in 2013, and up to date, the electoral laws have not been aligned to the Constitution. It's not like we are asking the state or the Minister of Justice, Parliament, or ZEC to implement something new. We are simply saying, let the electoral laws be aligned to the Constitution. And more so, there are some reforms that really do not need an act of parliament. Those are what we call administrative reforms, which are within the purview of ZEC. And those reforms are very critical in the sense that they build credibility to the election, to the electoral process. For example, we talk about issues around, results management. Even the Motlanthe Commission spoke to the issue of ZEC implementing ICT systems that will ensure that the results are expedited so that we avoid a situation a similar situation which happened on August 1 where some people eventually got killed because there were protests around the delay in the results announcements. So we talk about even the issues around assisted voters. That is an administrative issue. It does not really need an act of parliament for ZEC to actually say, no, these are the measures that we put in place to ensure that, we actually scrutinize or we actually assess the people that qualified for assisted voting privileges. So let's sit down as Zimbabweans and also as the CCC. This is why we prepared our electoral blueprint, which we called prepare the pre-electoral part on electoral reforms, which we offered not just to citizens only, but even to ZEC, even to the Minister of, of Justice and other civic society organizations, other stakeholders that are responsible for elections to say, this is our offering as the CCC. Let's have dialogue in terms of the of what we expect in terms of the electoral reform, so that at the end of the day we have an election which is satisfactory for everyone, an election that has credibility and an election that has integrity. Fifthly, and the last issue, is the aspect around the nomination fees. Last year, ZEC gazetted fees, nomination fees for candidates that aspire to be in Parliament or even the presidential affairs. When we did our calculations as the citizens movement, we realized that we'll need around $244,000 US, which is $250,000, you know, to just field candidates throughout the country. So, and that is pretty unsustainable. And we're looking at a country called Zimbabwe, which is supposed to be a multi-party democracy. If we are a party which at the end of the day we are not able to field the candidates throughout the country, then we cease to be a multi-party democracy. And if we have candidates, for example, you go to our constitution, it says each and every eligible citizen has the right to vote or has the right to be voted for. So surely if I want to be a presidential candidate, but then I cannot afford the $20,000 US being demanded by ZEC, then that clearly that is an infringement of my political right to be voted for. So this is why, this is our call to ZEC to say, please review those fees. And those fees also, it's difficult to justify them. How do you justify a member of parliament, an aspiring member of parliament, paying $1,000 US to be a candidate? So that is a cause for concern, and we are engaging ZEC in that regard to say, let there be engagements in terms of the multi-party stakeholders meetings to see how best those fees can be reviewed so that all eligible persons that feel they want to be candidates are not left out. So basically this is our presser today, but let me just say what is our call? What is it that we want we expect from today's presser? Firstly, is the voters' roll. We are asking that the voters be released immediately and above all before the proclamation. That is what we are requesting for. The fact that the voters' roll is out there for, for scrutiny, for inspection by citizens, clearly the voters' roll is ready. So there is no reason why we shouldn't be given access to the voters' roll. And by the way, voter inspection is not voters' roll audit. You can inspect, when you go to inspect, it's just you as an individual inspecting whether your name is there. But then auditing is a different issue altogether. Verifying is a different issue altogether. So this is why it's important that we are given the soft copy of the voters' roll. And secondly, as I indicated earlier, we are imploring to all eligible citizens above the 18 years and above to say this is the last call for you to register as a voter. If you don't take that opportunity, then you won't be able to vote on election day. So please, let's take it up and exercise our political rights as the citizens of Zimbabwe. Of course, the third issue is to do with the voters' roll inspection. I spoke about the importance of us inspecting the voters' roll, why we need to inspect the voters' roll. Let's not risk ourselves being turned away on election day because of one mistake which could have been avoided by us checking our names on the voters' roll. So let's utilize this opportunity, inspect the voters' roll, and identify where there are anomalies or errors so that they be corrected on time. And lastly, of course, is the aspect of electoral reforms. As the citizens movement, we have a keen interest on electoral reforms, and our MPs are busy in that regard to push as many electoral reforms as possible through the parliamentary process. And also, we continue imploring ZEC to actually, promulgate the administrative reforms which are within their purview, which really do not need an act of parliament. So that's all. I thank you.
Thank you very much to Ms. Shiriedenga. We'll just open the floor to a few questions, should any journalists have them, and then we'll just wrap the presser up. As usual, please just put your hand up, indicate which news house you come from, and just ask one question so that we can get a few within the time that we've got. Yes, sir.
Entirely from 268X. You alluded to ZANU-PF linked organizations having access to the voters' form. What implication does it have on the electoral system as it is, and any remit to that?
So obviously, in terms of our constitution, the voters' roll should be accessed by every single political party. In fact, every citizen who's able to pay the fee should obtain a copy of that voters' roll. What we've seen since the voter registration process is that it would appear that ZANU-PF has a copy of this voters' roll. Why do we say this? You saw all the WhatsApp messages or the SMS messages that everyone was receiving, which were allegedly from Mr. Edi Mnangagwa, saying, please join this WhatsApp group that belongs to ZANU-PF. What's interesting about those WhatsApp messages is that they correlate with the new boundaries and not the old ones. So it's obvious that there are two issues. The voters' roll doesn't disclose people's phone numbers. The question that we ask ZEC is, how did ZANU-PF obtain each and every citizen's phone number? That information is in ZEC's database. Does ZANU-PF have access to that database? That's the question that we're asking in terms of the law. More fundamentally than that, if Mr. Mnangagwa was able to send those messages, it means he's got some information that we don't have, because certainly we don't have the kind of information that would allow us to establish who is registered in which constituency, and also the polling areas and polling stations. And so we continue to demand to ZEC, this election should not only be free and fair, it should also be credible. Thank you very much to Ms. Shiriedenga. We'll just open the floor to a few questions, should any journalists have them, and then we'll just wrap the presser up. As usual, please just put your hand up, indicate which news house you come from, and just ask one question so that we can get a few within the time that we've got. Yes, sir.
Entirely from 268X. You alluded to ZANU-PF linked organizations having access to the voters' form. What implication does it have on the electoral system as it is, and any remit to that?
So obviously, in terms of our constitution, the voters' roll should be accessed by every single political party. In fact, every citizen who's able to pay the fee should obtain a copy of that voters' roll. What we've seen since the voter registration process is that it would appear that ZANU-PF has a copy of this voters' roll. Why do we say this? You saw all the WhatsApp messages or the SMS messages that everyone was receiving, which were allegedly from Mr. Edi Mnangagwa, saying, please join this WhatsApp group that belongs to ZANU-PF. What's interesting about those WhatsApp messages is that they correlate with the new boundaries and not the old ones. So it's obvious that there are two issues. The voters' roll doesn't disclose people's phone numbers. The question that we ask ZEC is, how did ZANU-PF obtain each and every citizen's phone number? That information is in ZEC's database. Does ZANU-PF have access to that database? That's the question that we're asking in terms of the law. More fundamentally than that, if Mr. Mnangagwa was able to send those messages, it means he's got some information that we don't have, because certainly we don't have the kind of information that would allow us to establish who is registered in which constituency, and also the polling areas and polling stations. And so we continue to demand to ZEC, this election should not only be free and fair, it should also be credible. You can't give one party the voters' roll and then deny it to another. You can't disclose people's phone numbers, their private data, to one political party and then obviously abuse that information for political purposes. This is why we continue to say that ZEC has a constitutional obligation to be independent, to be non-partisan. They cannot take ZANU-PF's side. We then have the problem of FAZ and the Heritage Trust, these shady institutions that are being used by Mr. Mnangagwa. Now, the question we ask is this. The Constitution provides for a Central Intelligence Organization. Who are these shady organizations? What is their mandate? Where do they come from? What job are they performing? We don't want any intimidation of voters. We don't want them to profile people. We saw them frog marching sometimes, citizens to go and vote in ZANU-PF primaries. And so we've continuously said that we take issue with the interference of FAZ, and the Heritage Trust with the general rights of citizens. They cannot be allowed to intimidate and harass citizens. This election should be free and fair. Everybody's vote is secret, so we don't want them coming in to frog march people. Ellen already indicated that we don't want traditional leaders also abused by ZANU-PF, where they're given these unconstitutional instructions. The courts have already said that traditional leaders, there's a case directly involving one of our chiefs, I think it's a publicly available case, saying you cannot get involved in partisan politics.